All right, the Nancy Wright, whose name that you saw up there, was a longtime partner of Randy Parker, and when he passed away, she had all of his films and stills and all of the projects he had worked on. And his other relatives, his children, didn't want them, and she really didn't know what to do with them. She couldn't just keep them around, and she was basically thinking of trashing them at some point. Ooh. So I visited her, and they were spread out in a garage and a storage thing and places of her house. And I said, well, is the shortest straw here? Are his commercials here? And she said, well, everything she had would be here. And she said she was going to try to collate it all and put it all in one spot. So the next time I came back to Wichita, she had done that. And she said, take whatever you want. So I took everything that was 16 millimeter and a few things that weren't. And the shortest straw, his copy of the shortest straw was there. And I got it to Joel, who was able to start transferring it. And then eventually we heard about Justin and met him and did pretty much what you see here. But that's where that came from. I had met Parker in the 70s when he tried to do a screening of The Shortest Straw at the old Marple Theater, which was showing films from about 1979 to 1981, or end of 78 to 81. And it was shown there, and we also showed it then in 1986 as part of the Wichita Film Society. So that's more or less how this part came about. But anyway, if there's any questions about how the production of the actual film or anything else involving anything, we've got people up here who are part of it, and be glad to answer.
I just would like to know a little bit more about Randall Parker. I knew he made this film, but not much about him.
Well, he was a filmmaker and photographer, and at an early part in Wichita in the 60s, he started getting involved in the local art scene in Wichita, as far as I know. I'm not an expert on.
He was a cameraman out of Cake TV for many years with, what was it?
I don't know.
Station. Can't remember.
Martin Umansky?
Martin Umansky, yeah.
And he made the first nationally syndicated or done Pizza Hut commercial. The putt to the Pizza Hut. You can find it online on YouTube. And he did some local things for Taco Tico and some other commercials. And he was at, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting now if it was Boeing or Cessna, but he was part of their industrial films there. So he made films for them. And at one point he traveled around in a van from city to city, and he would go in and contact businesses and say, do you need commercials made? I can make these commercials for you. And that's how he made his living for a while. And he had this script for The Shortest Straw. He met Jeff Husson, and Husson wanted to make a film and was working on a script, and he told me that he read Parker's and thought it was a better one, and they teamed up to make this film. And then Parker also made, the other thing he was known for was the Kirby's beer store across 17th Street at Wichita State, where all the hipsters would hang out, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he would go there, and they had big Halloween parties, and everybody would come in costume, and he would film them, and then the next year he would come and film again, and he would screen the previous year's films for some of the people attending Kirby's. And so then this went on for a decade and a half that he did that. And then he also shot other little films, wrestling films, costume films. He was working on science fiction stuff. And he also got involved in some of the other independent film projects in the area over the years. So
didn't he work on King Kung Fu?
He worked a little on King Kung Fu. He worked a little on the Duke Kelly films. Ride the Wild Wind, or Ride the...
well,
My Name is
Wild
Legend
Wind was the previous things
Yeah,
that Kelly had done before.
Yeah, two...
But the, My Name is Legend.
Yeah. And you were involved in both of those, right?
Yeah, I was production manager and
King Kung
second
Fu?
camera.
King Kung Fu you were on?
Well, yeah, I got roped into that.
God, that was funny.
But in fact, they called me back. I was out of town, and person shows up and says, "Oh, they're shooting this film back in Wichita," and he says he wants you.
So Tim, do you remember when the prologue was shot? Because that was shot after the actual production of the film, right? And Parker
Yes
did
and
that
no.
himself.
There was part of it. There was
71, I think.
there was a big scene that was not the film was under or overexposed because it was at night and they had the whole convoy, and that's where the original discussion of the color of the rubber stamp thing.
Oh,
And there were armored cars, military vehicles, and everybody that Parker and I and other people knew showed up, and suddenly they were wearing costumes that they could probably never run for office again.
Yeah.
That was this whole German thing. But and that's what those guys were really, the resistance guys were, looking through the trees, and that's why they had they found out about this special truck. But since they couldn't use any of that, then they just went with what you saw, and then years later, they wanted to add more to that, so it made more sense.
Yeah, when I met Parker, and almost every time I saw him, for the rest of the times I saw him, he would always bring up, I still haven't edited that prologue yet, or sometimes he called it the alternate opening.
alternate
But,
opening.
But it was just to establish what,
yeah.
why are these guys and why is this so,
Yeah, and it sets up the joke about the stamp ink, and it emphasizes the absurdity of stuff, the sort of semi-existentialist bent that he drops hints in throughout the film. So. Anyway, does that address your Parker? Okay, good. Thank you. So. Other questions about any aspect at all? Yes.
For Jane, when did you start acting? I mean, how did this fall in your career?
Yeah, well, my father conducted the symphony here for years, and he wanted me to be a cellist. So, being the dutiful first daughter, I complied and became quite a good cellist and all that, and played in the symphony. But I always wanted to be on stage rather than, playing the cello. So I worked with Mary Jane Teal, and both Jeff and I were in Commedia for about 3 summers, I think, one of which is when we shot this. And then she always cast me, I did Birdie and Little Foxes, and she always cast me with these Tennessee Williams depraved Southern heroines, honey. So I did a number of shows with her. And I was in music theater way back in the day when they were just starting, about the 2nd or 3rd year, 1976 or 8 or something. So I had been acting, but this is my first camera piece. I'm now a Screen Actors Guild member, and only in Wichita because of the pandemic, and we lost all our work on both coasts, so I came back here to write. But it's interesting being back. Yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah.
Kinda. I mean, I've done a lot of work now on both coasts. Some good work, repertory. I've done The Nurse in Romeo and Juliet, and I did a lot of camera work in New York, funnily enough. Investigation Discovery Channel. I've got a couple of leads on those shows, and I'm anxious to get back. I love it. I love my work, and this is the first camera bit that I'd ever done. And I hadn't seen this thing since it was shown on a sheet at somebody's big party here in Wichita. I can't remember when, but they strung up a sheet and they showed it at a big party. It was, Jim Rao, who was a designer, and he had big parties, and somehow or other it got shown there, and that's the only time I've ever seen it.
As far as we know, there hasn't been that many screenings, right? From what we've been able to find out, there was a screening of a shorter version than this, one that's 25 minutes less in length, in 1968, and that was the big debut. And then about a year later, Parker showed his longer version, which would basically be this, but without the prologue. And then it was another 10 years or so before that showing at the Marple. And then, like I said, a 1986 showing on the CAC campus by the Wichita Film Society again, and outside of a party showing or two, I don't know what Parker did. That would be it. That was all there was. That's until now.
I tell you, it's really weird to see myself, you know, as I was 6 decades ago. It's really strange. She was gorgeous, that young thing up there.
I want a time machine.
Yeah, really.
So I guess looking at your original performance or your first camera performance, now that you're an actress many years later, are there things that you saw that surprised you how good you were, or you cringed?
I cringed at the script. The dialogue, being a very good dialogue writer myself now, I didn't know that much at the time we shot, you know, of course, and so I went along with the script, but I would have made multiple corrections that would have made it a more easy flowing dialogue, and then not so hammered. I mean, Rex just hammered every damn line, you know, and so I had to return, you know, with the hammered line, but yeah, I would have made multiple changes.
Well, Ben,
But, you know, we didn't know that much back then. And the direction was lacking in terms of, and the editing, in terms of the intercutting with close-ups that weren't really, shouldn't have been close-ups. Could have been a medium shot or a 2-shot, you know, and it would have made a better flow with the script. But, I mean, Randy was not a script writer. He was not an actor. And so it fell short in terms of good dialogue, in my opinion.
I think it's pretty remarkable considering it was post-synced, right?
Yeah, that's
the
true.
performances are all post-synced, so the fact that so much emotion and everything comes in and it works as well as it is, I think.
I tell you, syncing is one of the hardest jobs as an actor. It's really tough. You're watching the screen and you're having to match, you know, your lips exactly with consonants and vowels and stuff, plus the emotion, you know, the inflection is a tough job.
Plus, I want to point out that Joel spent hours and hours making sure that things were about as synced as they could be.
Yay,
the
Joel!
whole,
for
the
some
whole
of this.
film was out of sync. The whole first
Oh man,
half.
it's tough.
The
And-
transfer
Yeah.
had some issues
Well,
and
that
stuff.
was the
but-
other-
so the director's version, like I said, runs about 55 minutes instead of the 85 here, and doesn't have the prologue. And some parts are different, of course. And he said if he had the time and the energy, you know, to redo it just for himself or for fun, there's lots of stuff where he would resync and do it. And he says there's times where the sight lines, the eyesights are off. You know, someone's looking this way, but then you cut to the thing and the road is the other direction. And
Well, I
and
tell you,
things
the
like that,
sound was
so-
a huge problem in
Yeah.
shooting because of the wind in Kansas.
Yeah.
That's why we had to sync. That's why we had to go to syncing, because we didn't plan to do that. We
Jeff
had a
also said there
boom mic and everything else, but I mean, the wind just trashed it all.
And he said there was some kind of camera they tried to get from Cake TV, but Cake TV wouldn't let them use
Wouldn't
it.
let 'em
so
use
they had
it.
to.
Yeah, well, it had
Some
a
other-
built-in microphone,
Yeah.
see, and for close-ups, then we could have not had to sync the close-ups with the built-in mic on the camera, as I recall. But Cake wouldn't let go of it.
I also think for somebody's, you know, doing the first feature film and it's an independent film, I mean, nowadays they would do like a weird romantic comedy or a sleazy teenage thing or a horror film.
Or a horror
Right?
film.
You would go for that kind of genre thing. But to try to do something so unique and original, I mean, I applaud the filmmakers for that. I mean, weakness of script or bad direction choices for a first time through, I'm stunned at how high the bar was
The
set.
age of the art film and
The art film.
emulating, you know, stuff coming out of Europe. So
Well, I mean, that was one of the joys of being
and
at
the
WSU
overpowered
then,
music.
were the Fellini films and the Bergman
Right.
films. I mean, that was our juice, you know. We'd go religiously to the Film Association for those shows. And this reflects that era. I think you're absolutely right. The black and white era, you know. All those Fellini films, I can't think of the titles now. Something 8 and whatever.
8.5.
8.5.
La Strada and
La Strada.
all those. Yes, La Dolce Vita, of course.
Yeah.
Tim, where did the uniforms and hardware come from?
Skip got a lot of that because he was a collector. I had closets full of stuff that was just from all the other shows I'd done.
And Mary Jane had stuff. I remember
Yeah.
going into her costume thing and pulling out helmets and,
Going to
you
the-
know,
in the
fur
basement.
skins and stuff for the fantasy scenes.
She had a lot of
I don't know where we got the armor. I don't know how the hell I rode that horse. I mean, I cantered with armor on.
You did a good
and
job.
a fucking sword in one hand. I mean, I'm going, woo! smooth, you know?
When I contacted Jeff Husson, and I found his name, and I contacted him, I said, does the phrase Wichita, Kansas, 1968, the shortest straw mean anything to you? And he emailed back and said, how the hell do you know about that film? He says, I've got the world's only print. And I said, no, I've got the world's other print, and it was Randy Parker's print.
And he was actually in New Zealand at the time, too.
Yeah, he was in New Zealand at the time. He worked in British television, had a long, extensive career as a producer and sometimes director in British TV and then New Zealand, and he's only retired a couple years ago. But anyway, so he answered a lot of my questions about it and was surprised and saw Parker's version, and he said, I don't remember getting Jane on a horse. 'Cause
Oh, come
that wasn't
on, Jesus.
That wasn't in his shorter version.
Oh,
Some of
that was one of the best scenes.
Yeah, the other fantasy sequences are, but that one isn't.
Well,
That's
this is the
bad.
one.
So he didn't remember
that,
it.
What ended up in the film was the second camera.
The second
The second
cameraman.
camera. And that's why a lot of it's a little, you know.
Little rough,
whatever.
yeah.
But when they loaded.
Was handheld,
when they,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they loaded the primary, he didn't thread.
He didn't thread it
film.
right. I remember something about that. And I remember riding that horse, and the second cameraman on foot was in the middle of all this shit that was
Right.
going down, the swords and the helmets and the horse, and I had to like be sure I avoided the damn camera. But that's how he got the close-ups. That's how he was shooting like 5 feet away to my face with the helmet on.
There's some
Remember
great
that?
shots in it too.
There's some
I
very
mean,
good shots.
The one where it's half of Mahan's face,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
and there's a few others like that. And the fact that they got that plane and
Oh,
he
the
was
plane,
able to do
and that fellow was German. His name was Peter, and in filming
Later on
it,
crashed.
what?
He later on crashed.
He later on crashed, but first,
But
he
he thought-
chased cows down the arroyo and the farmers had a fit,
Right. Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and then he crashed into some Flint Hills rock.
He
and
used to-
died.
He used to think of it as, he tried to, as we said, he tried to blow all the pies off of picnics
Oh,
when he'd fly
sure.
over the table.
He was something else, a
he
very
broke
interesting
every
guy.
effing
Yeah,
along.
very interesting
But
guy.
he
Yes, sir.
was- He was a character.
Along that line, do you recall the locations used for filming?
Well, the Stone Bridge is down near Wellington, to the best of my recollection, because I know we went out successive weekends looking for the right bridge. And
Just
Wellington
outside
has a
of Rock.
lot of stone quarries and a lot of stone houses, and I believe we found it on some narrow little county road down there.
based on what Jeff, Jane, and Tim told me, Joel was able to, I think, find it. So Joel, where was
Well-
your best guess?
It's like the Rock Creek Bridge.
Yeah.
Rock Creek Bridge, that's exactly what it
Because
was.
it's outside of Rock, Kansas.
So,
Rock
the Rock
Creek,
Creek,
yeah.
there's that. The other stuff, like where's the
This is-
train trestle where you guys are calling along the
I
wire?
don't know, I don't remember, that was
Yeah.
kind of a dangerous shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that footbridge, you know, that wasn't,
Yeah, that wasn't
that
active,
was-
was it?
Yeah. And
It's weird.
someone mentioned, I heard people talking about the Surfs. For those who don't know, they were a really popular band at that time in Wichita, and a couple years after the film, they made their one and only album. 2 members of the Surfs went on to some measure of
Finnegan went
fame.
on,
well, Mike
Lane-
Finnegan just died a few years
Yeah,
ago,
a
and
couple years
he
ago.
was a really well-known session,
And he had
Hammond
charting-
B3 and pianist.
And he had some charting hits in the late 70s.
Yeah, he
too,
did, and he
so-
worked for Linda Ronstadt, he worked for Maria Moldauer, lots and lots
It
of
was on
people.
Jimi Hendrix's first
And, yeah.
album, too.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
the other main one was Lane Tietgen, who had a pretty extensive folk career and recorded Silver Rick and was in the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood and is on
Jerry
that
Hahn
album.
Brotherhood, yeah.
And then, as Joel just said, they were in London, and Jimi Hendrix saw them and invited them over to his apartment studio or home studio, and he was recording things that would eventually end up on his Electric Ladyland album.
Yeah.
So they did a big all-night jam, Hendrix with members of the Surfs.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the Electric Ladyland album, there's at least 2 cuts on it where members of the Surfs are the band
I
performing
was
with
playing
Hendrix.
jazz cello in London, and I was booked on a session with Mike Finnegan playing, and I hadn't seen him in years. And I'd forgotten about the film, but I, of course, didn't forget about the band. The Surfs were terrific.
Anyway, other Yes.
How many days did you spend on the bridge filming?
You know, as I recall, by the time we located the locations that we wanted, we spent most of that summer every weekend out there in the heat. And I'll never forget, it was like 110 in the shade when I had on armor and riding the horse. And everybody was in skins and whatever. Oh my God, it was so hot. But we managed to do it, and I think we bled on into September while it was, you know, I think
Yeah.
it took us probably 2.5 months of weekends for sure.
Yeah, Hassan's memory was that if you combined it, it was just like 2 to 2.5 weeks at the bridge. But again, like you said,
They were just weekend
2 days
days.
here,
We're
2
just
days here,
talking
2 days
Saturday,
here.
Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, you know.
But-
But the post stuff was really took forever. All the sound editing and stuff took a long time.
Did you just have the one costume?
What? Yeah. It was one day, you know. She didn't.
And if you were wondering about the budget, the entire budget was no more than $15,000
Yeah.
for the whole process.
In that year's.
67, 68, yeah, in that
That would
money.
be a lot
Yes.
more now.
Wonder what it would be now.
I don't know, I'd have to get the figure out.
Calculated.
Still very small.
They spent a lot of money gassing up those trucks that never ended up in the movie.
Oh,
And people didn't realize how big the gas tank on military vehicles are.
huge.
And one of the gas pumps was already on it looped over and was actually starting over again with the number of gallons, and they
Whoa,
ran over.
that
Because
was a
people
lot of
were
money.
used to, I mean, you know, gas cost a lot less back then. People were used to just hooking the deal up and walking away, and when it would fill up, it would stop, right? So this thing kept dinging and dinging and dinging and dinging, and they go, oh my God, we're putting, you know, 50, 100 gallons in this thing.
You know what we could do, Jane, is you could write a new movie where this is the flashbacks and do make a whole different movie out of it using all these scenes as a flashback.
flashbacks.
Yeah, yeah.
But what would the current time version be? What
I
would-
don't know, but you could start it though.
I wanted to say something about the leading man, Rex Mahan.
Yeah.
He died right when the film was being premiered. He was a motorcycle enthusiast.
Yeah.
And the story I got from versions of it, both from Parker and Husson, was that the edit that's 55 minutes was having its debut in spring of 1968 at Wilner Auditorium on the WSU campus. And he was on his way to it on a motorbike when he had a crash. And he died 3 or 4 days later as a result of that crash.
Wow.
So he never got to see any version of the finished film. He was 33, 32 years old.
33 or 2, yeah. Really
old,
nice
so.
guy.
And I heard that
Really nice guy.
Dick Welsbacher was supposed to play that role. Do you know anything or remember anything
I
about
remember
that?
it was mentioned, and Dick was just too busy to commit to all his weekends with his handicapped child and Betty and all of that. It just didn't work out for
Also an
us.
era when theater was theater.
Theater was
Only
theater.
problems
Oh,
are
and
in
you go to
movies, you know.
film, you
Why, if
know,
they make a
oh.
mistake, they can shoot it over. you know.
Yeah.
Of course, my always argument with
Yeah, Dick was kind of
people
a
I work with,
purist.
I said, well, yeah, but you can have a different performance every night,
Every single.
and you'll only be criticized on that night's performance.
That's right.
If you're in a film and you're doing interiors, it might be a month later
Yeah.
when you walk through that door, quote unquote, the same door,
Yeah.
and you gotta match.
Yeah,
Everything
you gotta-
about you, everything inside you has to match that performance.
It's a
Whereas-
challenge.
So you can't, so it's a different form of acting, but,
Very much so.
Well, he appeared in Tom Leahy's films. He's in The Beast from the Beginning of Time, and he's also in Green Hell from the Void. We just
Is that
found.
right? I don't remember
yeah.
that.
And of course, he's in the attic as the library or as a police detective. And he narrated a documentary a lot of people don't know about called Treasured Islands about Robert Louis Stevenson's retirement to Samoa.
Oh.
And he narrated that documentary. So
Well, in answer to your question, I really don't know, but I do remember Dick Welsbacher's name being brought up before we started shooting, and I just don't know what happened. I'm assuming because he was so busy that it was just too much of a commitment for the lead role.
Yeah.
I don't know where we got Rex. I don't know where he showed up from. Yeah.
Did you really shave him?
Well, we used a dull razor.
No.
We just used a dull razor, you know, make it look that way.
movie magic.
Do you have any more plans for showing this new version some places?
Well, of course, there's a screening tomorrow, so tell your friends at 4 o'clock.
We just got it finished for this screening, so we haven't had time to think about anything else.
Yeah,
To me, it needs to be seen.
Yes.
Because you talk, it hasn't been seen that much. It's been available on archive.
Right, yeah.
but
in
I don't know how
an
much it's
inferior version, yes, on
been-
archive.
'cause I had seen it there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was seeing if considering as there was a way to get it shown in Lawrence somehow, either associated with the film department at KU, or if Liberty Hall does those sorts of
Yeah.
things still, or somewhere else. There are some companies that might release it if we can make them think they might make $1 or $2. I don't see how. Jeff Husson said we could do anything we want with it. So we'll see. But yes, I would love to have it shown other places, or we're here again. An evening showing on a weekend maybe with some real publicity would be nice. But this is great. I really am glad all of you came out and
Oh, you guys
And
have put
it's so
so much
wonderful
work
to have-
into it, you know. it
to have
should be
these
shown.
people here. Are there other questions? Yes.
Tim, do you know how the explosion was done at the end?
That was a quarter stick of red crust dynamite and a big bag of flour sitting on top.
Big bag of flour.
So that's what all that big poofy
Yeah.
smoke.
Very much becomes a Wile E. Coyote kind of explosion at the
Well,
end.
how did we do the fire that was a distance away in the beginning when he thought he shot down the plane?
Well, they burned some crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
burned some-
They burned some farmers, you know, wheat.
Stuff you can't do now.
Yeah, right, I was wondering.
Yes, sir.
I just thought that was a very modern script.
Yeah, good.
The plot just seemed like it was unusual for the time.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, as Jane was saying, it doesn't totally work all the way through, but there's some remarkable things in it that you just wouldn't expect for this kind of thing. I mean, I'm a film buff and film scholar, and I just think it was a great first shot. You know, so in a lot of ways. So.
Well, a lot of when you're editing something, and you go and you think back and say, because I used to edit a lot of film, and I go, if that sound, I bet you'd just given me a cutaway.
Yeah.
I could put these two performances together.
Yeah.
And so you start looking all through the calls and say, well, here's the guy with a stupid look on his face. I can put that in there. And
Right.
so some of the pacing can kind of go awry because you didn't do all the coverage, you know. Or,
He should have used two cameras much more than just the one camera. That's what slows the pace down. And therefore slowed the editing process down. I mean, it's
right.
a little sluggish.
Husson told me he wasn't sure he really understood what Parker was getting at thematically, other than just, you know, what's happening in the action on the surface and the characters' interaction. And then looking at the longer cut now, he said maybe he understood it a little bit better. I don't know if Parker actually communicated real well what he was after thematically, but there's lots of hints in it of what he was going for, and some of it works, some of it doesn't. But I mean, just the fact that they were trying to
the best of friends.
Yeah,
What?
I
yeah.
don't think they left each other with the best
No, he
of
said
friends.
once they were editing, and he said they had a bit of a falling out.
Right,
So,
no, they
yeah.
didn't.
I just thought,
I
yes,
thought
sir.
the ending was fun, but
Yeah.
I also thought they missed a bet when, after Hitler and his drivers drove over the bridge, that line, after all, what can two people do?
Yeah,
That would have been a nice coda to
Uh-huh.
the whole movie.
yeah. There's bits in there, but yeah, there's lots of ways to improve it. But again, I just think it's so remarkable in
Well,
its
I
own
think
self.
it was
so.
a very challenging thing to take on in 1968 in Wichita, Kansas, you know.
And existentialism too.
Yeah.
Well, I
that's-
found that scene when they're talking philosophy a bit boring, frankly. I would have cut that much, you know. I mean, yeah, you could get the idea, but it went on and on and on between the two main characters.
Kind of like
And
the existentialist.
Yeah. Yeah, but that was
was
what
too
Parker was
existential.
getting for, again, that the prologue heightens the absurdity of it all and the randomness of things. It weaves in a couple of other times, and there's several moments in the film that are supposed to alienate you from trying to take it as a real verisimilitude. You know, so the music doesn't fit what we would, the time period that the film is set in, or a standard conventional Hollywood music. The fact that your character looks to the audience and makes that one remark, oh,
Yeah.
his reaction is interesting. There's a couple other things that disrupt,
yeah,
you know, that sort of thing. Oh, and I wanted to mention too, in the shorter version, Jim Erickson has the German guard early on in it. In the shorter version, his short scene is even shorter, and basically he's, you know, you see him standing there, and then, you know, it moves over to the bridge, and then you see his feet being dragged away.
Oh, yeah.
All the other stuff isn't in it. And Jim said he remembered thinking when he saw the debut, he said that his boots gave an excellent performance.
that would be
That's a
Jim.
typical Jim
And
remark.
they were hobnailed,
Yeah,
as I
yes.
recall.
I think we have another
But it
screening
is-
of some other film at 4, and I'm not sure what time it is, and we
It's
may,
like just after 3.
it's only,
Three. You have a handful
we
of
have
minutes.
time.
Maybe a couple
Okay,
more.
sorry about that. I
Since
didn't
it was
know.
black and white, he was wearing a
Yes.
U.S. Air Force
Yeah.
tunic.
Great.
Because, you know,
Well, I think the soundtrack, the music, is some of the best stuff in the whole film, frankly. I mean, you know, to hear Mike Finnegan singing like that, I mean, Mike was a great musician. The
Was-
whole track was great.
Was he singing every time we heard
Not
it?
every
Or was
time.
it was Lane Tietgen on that one?
Lane
that
was too, yeah, I believe.
Where you go down to get the water to shave him, that's Lane Tietgen singing.
I think
on
it
that.
must have been, because the voice was different.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Pretty
that, and now it's fine, fine, fine. I
Yeah.
love that tune. It was a really good tune.
How did they talk you into the brief flash of nudity?
Oh, they didn't have to talk too long. I'm a risk taker.
They were guarded of you, though.
Yeah, well, I know.
So,
I remember Jim saying that caused quite a stir at the debut because
Did it?
people were not expecting it.
Well, at the time I was, you know, and I made Parker look the other way, you know. I think actually I made Jeff hold the camera during the scene, so Parker was off in the woods somewhere. Lecherous thing that he was. Yeah.
Yes,
Now, you said Parker wrote this?
yes.
Yeah.
Did he write anything else?
He wrote the other stuff he worked on, and he actually, with of course the clients, wrote the commercials that he did.
But no other movies, plays?
No other feature film that I know of that was ever filmed. He may have written
One that was
scripts.
ever filmed.
Was
It
that-
looked exactly like a film that was shot 20 years before.
Yeah.
And that happens to writers.
Yeah.
They don't remember having seen another person's work, and then somehow it
Right.
comes out of their hand,
Huh.
and then the Writers Guild jumps all over and says,
Not
"You can't-
this writer."
You can't do this." No, but I mean, you know, because you are influenced by what you see, what you hear, or whatever, and so.
Well, it helps if you base it on a true story, and this, my series is based on my life and all my adventures of people like Muddy Waters teaching me the blues, and Lee Strasberg is my acting coach, and, you know, so it's a tribute to this stuff. And it's much easier when you're writing something that's already here, you know, that you already lived through.
Well, you know yourself better than anybody else.
Exactly.
Well, most people, some people.
Any other thoughts, issues, concerns, questions about the original production or salvaging it or anything else?
Just congratulations
Oh, well,
to you and Joel, honestly,
was-
that was
We want,
amazing.
Joel
work.
has spent a long time trying to track down and preserve Kansas media
Well,
and
to your
particularly
credit,
film. And so.
I've got to go.
Okay.
Just a minute.
And so this is all sort of part of that larger process. And because I knew Randy Parker and I knew about the film, I wanted to make sure it didn't get trashed when I heard that he had passed away. So,
Well, Carnival Souls was the only other thing people.
yeah.
All of Parker's films are online now and on the Internet Archive, so you can see the other versions of the film. You can see Geoff Hewson's, is that correct?
Hudson.
Jeff-
Husson, his version of the film.
Okay? Any others? All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming.